First, let's start with this case. So, I work as a parking attendant at a local shopping center. It's a pretty chill job, but sometimes I have to deal with some pretty entitled people. Most of the time, it's uneventful. But there was this one day last week that really tested my patience. I was doing my usual rounds, making sure everything was in order, checking for people parked in reserved spots and the like. We have a few parking spots designated for customers with disabilities, and those spots are clearly marked. It's a pretty big deal to keep those spaces available for people who really need them, and I take my job seriously in that regard. I'm the kind of person who believes rules are rules, and if you break them, there are consequences. So, I was walking around when I saw a car parked in one of the disability spots. No permit, no valid reason, it just had a regular parking tag. At first, I thought maybe someone had a medical condition and hadn't updated their permit, so I decided to check. But as I walked closer, I saw a woman getting out of the car. She looked like she was in a rush, like she had something important to do. Now, I'm not a confrontational person. I didn't want to make a scene, but I couldn't just ignore it. I walked up to her and politely told her, "Excuse me, ma'am, this spot is reserved for customers with disabilities. Do you have a permit for it?" She immediately looked at me like I was the one who was out of line. She rolled her eyes and said, "I'm too busy to park somewhere else. It's not like I'm going to be here long. Can't you just let it go?" At this point, I was already getting a little frustrated. I told her again that the spot was reserved for people who need it, and it wasn't fair to take up a spot that someone else might need. I wasn't trying to be rude, I was just doing my job. But she wasn't having it. "I don't have time to move. I'm taking care of my family. I have a child with me, and I need to be in and out. You can't expect me to waste time looking for another spot when I have so much to do." I didn't know what she meant by taking care of her family, or how that had anything to do with parking illegally, but it seemed like she was trying to guilt-trip me. She kept saying how important her time was and how much she had to juggle. It was clear to me that she wasn't going to move without a bigger reason. I was just trying to do my job, so I told her, "I understand that you're busy, but that doesn't change the fact that this spot is meant for people who really need it. You'll need to move your car." She told me again that she didn't have time for this and demanded I let it go. She started walking away as though the situation was over, but I wasn't going to back down. I asked her one more time to move her car, and she just ignored me. It felt like I was talking to a brick wall. A few minutes later, a customer came up to me and pointed out the car parked in the disabled spot. They asked me if I was going to do something about it because it was causing a problem. I told them that I had already asked the driver to move, but she wasn't cooperating. The customer wasn't happy and said they would call the police to report it. Honestly, I wasn't expecting the situation to escalate this much, but I figured maybe it would help. The customer left, and I kept an eye on the car, hoping the woman would finally get the message and move. I was standing near the entrance when a police officer showed up a few minutes later. The customer had indeed called the police. The officer approached me and asked what was going on, so I explained the situation. A woman had parked in the disability spot without a permit and refused to move when I asked her to. The officer walked up to the woman, who was now standing near her car, fiddling with her phone. He asked her if she had a permit for the spot, and she just looked at him like he was crazy. She told him she didn't have one, and gave the same excuse she had given me about being too busy and taking care of her family. The officer wasn't having any of it. He told her that parking in a disability spot without a permit was illegal, no matter what her personal circumstances were. He asked her for her driver's license, and she gave it to him, still looking like she didn't understand why she was being treated this way. The officer then turned to me and asked if I had already told her to move, and I confirmed that I had. He told the woman that she had been given a chance to move her car and hadn't done so, and now she would face the consequences. He pulled out a ticket book and started writing her a fine. The woman started to argue again, saying she didn't deserve this, and that she was just trying to take care of her family. The officer cut her off and told her that the rules were there for a reason, and it didn't matter how busy or important she thought she was. If she didn't respect the rules, then she would have to pay the fine. It was hard to feel bad for her at that point. She had made it clear she wasn't going to follow the rules, and now she was facing the consequences. She didn't seem too happy about it, though. She kept trying to argue with the officer, but he just stood there, telling her that not respecting the rules was her problem, not his. Eventually, he handed her the fine, and she walked away in a huff. The situation was finally over, and I could go back to doing my rounds. But I still couldn't believe how entitled she had been. It's one thing to be late or busy, but that doesn't give you the right to break the rules and inconvenience others. It wasn't like I was asking for much, just for her to park in a spot where she was supposed to. I wasn't being unreasonable, but she sure acted like I was. Now I'm wondering if I handled this situation correctly. I'm sure she thought I was just being a stickler for the rules, but I didn't want to let it slide. It's about respect, and rules are in place for a reason. So am I in the wrong for insisting she move her car? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. You were just doing your job. There are rules in place for a reason, and she clearly thought she was above them. Good on you for sticking to your guns. You're not in the wrong. She didn't care about the rules or anyone else's needs. You did what you were supposed to do, and it was her own actions that got her a fine. She had multiple chances to fix it, but she refused to listen. You were in the right. You're not in the wrong. You were just trying to do the right thing. She didn't have a permit, and she refused to move even when asked. The fine was entirely her fault. Don't feel bad about doing your job. Next up, I manage a restaurant in a busy area of the city. Normally, things go smoothly, and most customers are reasonable. But there's always that one who expects special treatment. And yesterday, I had one of those customers. This story isn't a typical Karen encounter, though. It was an extreme version of it. I'm really not sure if I was wrong in handling it the way I did, but I need to know if I'm being unreasonable, so here it goes. A woman, probably in her late 40s or early 50s, came into the restaurant with her husband around lunchtime. They seemed friendly at first, nothing out of the ordinary. I greeted them, showed them to their table, and went about my usual duties. But things took a turn when they started complaining. First, she said the temperature of the room was too hot. I asked my staff to adjust the air conditioning, and she seemed satisfied for about 5 minutes. Then she said the lighting was too bright. I told my colleague to dim the lights a little bit, hoping that would be the end of it. But no, she wasn't done. She started complaining about the music. Apparently, the soft jazz playing in the background was too loud for her. I had the playlist lowered. At this point, I thought maybe she was just having a rough day, so I kept my cool and didn't make a big deal of it. I tried to keep a positive attitude and do everything I could to make her comfortable. Next, she took a sip of her water and immediately wrinkled her nose. She said it tasted disgusting and asked for a new glass. I thought that was a bit extreme, but I went ahead and had a fresh glass of water brought to her. She barely touched it before her complaints continued. "Everything is just wrong with this place," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for me to hear. I went over to ask her what the issue was, trying to be polite, but she didn't hold back. She started going off about how the food looked sloppy on the plate, how the chicken was dry, and how the salad was lifeless. I offered to have the kitchen remake her meal. I even said we could replace it with something else on the menu, hoping that would settle things. I thought maybe she just had higher expectations, so I was trying to keep things professional. But she wasn't having it. She snapped back that she wasn't here for the food. She was here for the experience, and the experience was horrible. Now, this is where things started getting tricky. She demanded that she not only get her food remade, but that the meal be completely free because of all the suffering she endured. Her words, not mine. She claimed that she was being forced to eat food that wasn't up to her standards, and that the restaurant should compensate her for ruining her day. I tried to explain to her that we couldn't give free food for something that was just a matter of preference. I offered her a discount instead and told her the kitchen had already put time and effort into preparing the meal, but that didn't work either. She wasn't interested in any compromise. She insisted that she wouldn't leave until I gave her a full refund and free food for the inconvenience, which at this point was just her complaining about things beyond our control. At this point, I had been dealing with her complaints for over an hour. I told her I couldn't give her a refund, especially after she had eaten most of her food. She became furious, yelling at me, calling me unprofessional, and accusing me of ruining the reputation of the restaurant. She threatened to leave a terrible review and call the media to have the place shut down. This was too much for me. I wasn't going to back down anymore. I told her to leave and that she would be fully charged for the meal. She stormed out, cursing under her breath. I stayed calm, though I was really frustrated by this point. My staff and I went about cleaning up the mess she left behind. The next day, she posted a nasty review on Yelp, describing the place as horrible and claiming that the food was inedible, the service was terrible, and the staff were rude. I couldn't let this slide, especially since everything she wrote was false. I replied to her review, giving a detailed account of what actually happened, explaining that we tried our best to accommodate her and offered a solution, but she wasn't interested in anything other than demanding free food. I also mentioned that she had eaten most of her meal, and that we couldn't just refund her for complaints that weren't about the quality of the food itself, but rather personal preferences. The whole situation has left me feeling conflicted. I know I did what I thought was right by standing my ground, but a part of me wonders if I could have handled it differently. I mean, maybe I could have just given her a discount and moved on, but she was unreasonable from the start. She was trying to manipulate the situation into getting a free meal. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. No way, you handled this perfectly. She was being entitled and unreasonable. You offered solutions, and when she still wasn't satisfied, you stood firm. A lot of restaurants would have caved, but you didn't, and you did nothing wrong by defending your restaurant online. Keep up the good work. You're not in the wrong. You were totally right. She was looking for a free meal by manipulating the situation. You did what was best for your restaurant. It's unfortunate that you had to go through all that, but it sounds like you stayed professional throughout. No one is in the wrong. I don't think anyone here is the asshole. She was being difficult, but I also think you probably could have diffused things better. The review wasn't great, but I get why you responded. All in all, this sounds like an unfortunate situation. Next up, I'm the owner of a small store that sells home goods and gifts. It's a place where people can come in to relax, look around, and enjoy some nice products, so I try to keep the atmosphere calm and pleasant for everyone. I have a no pets policy posted clearly at the entrance, mostly for safety reasons. Some people are allergic to animals, and we don't want any accidents involving the products. It's pretty standard for most places, but apparently some people don't care about rules. One day, around noon, a woman walks in with a big dog. I didn't notice her at first, but as she walked through the door, the dog was right behind her. I was talking to a customer at the register, so I didn't immediately react. But I saw the dog was pretty large, probably around 60 pounds or so, and I thought to myself, she can't be serious, right? I quickly walked over to her and kindly told her that pets weren't allowed in the store. I explained that we have a policy for the safety and comfort of all customers, as some of them might be allergic or afraid of dogs. Instead of agreeing to leave the dog outside, she turned to me and said, "I don't care about your stupid policy. I'm not leaving my dog outside, and I want to speak to your manager." At first, I was taken aback because I didn't expect her to be so confrontational over something so simple. I calmly told her that I was the manager, and I asked her again to please take her dog outside. She then went off on me, raising her voice and saying that the policy shouldn't apply to people like her. She even said, "Everyone loves dogs, so it doesn't matter if your policy says no pets. You can't make me follow it." At this point, I was still trying to stay calm. I told her that I understood she loved her dog, but it wasn't about whether or not people love dogs. It was about being considerate of others. I mentioned that some customers might have allergies, and not everyone is comfortable around animals. That's when things took a turn. She started yelling that I was discriminating against her because she had a dog and that I must hate animals. She then began to knock things off the shelves, causing some of the products to break. It was chaos, and I knew I had to do something. I asked her to leave the store, but she refused. She kept arguing that she had the right to be there with her dog, and she refused to take the animal outside. I tried to explain that she was trespassing, and if she didn't leave, I would have to call the police. She looked at me with a smug smile and said, "Go ahead and call them. They'll back me up." I wasn't going to let her ruin the experience for other customers or make a scene. So I called the police and explained the situation. It took a while for them to arrive, but when they did, they spoke to her for a few minutes. Eventually, they escorted her out of the store, and she was banned from coming back. It's been a few days now, and I'm still getting mixed reactions from my customers. Some of them praised me for standing up for the policy and keeping the store safe, while others think I could have handled it better and that calling the police was too extreme. Some of the regulars even said she was in the wrong and that I did the right thing, but I still feel uneasy about how it all went down. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. She clearly didn't respect the rules of the store. You tried to handle it calmly and gave her plenty of chances to leave without causing a scene. Once she started knocking over merchandise and causing a disturbance, you were left with no choice but to get the police involved. You're in the wrong. I understand that she was in the wrong, but calling the police for something like this seems over the top. There could have been a better way to deal with it without escalating the situation. You should have just asked her to leave, maybe even given her a chance to come back another time without the dog. The police might have been unnecessary. Everyone sucks. She definitely overreacted and caused a scene, but you also took the situation too far. You could have asked her to leave and then followed up with a warning or something less harsh before bringing in the police. It's a tough call, but it wasn't handled perfectly on either side.